Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to be featuring my Philodendron Burle Marx Fantasy and how it has progressed in my collection. And just to fast track y'all, I now have 3 plants growing on a pole. Without beating about the bush, these are my successful propagations. How I got to this point wasn't as pleasant as I wanted, and that full story will come later in the video. But for now, I want to introduce the sponsor of this video, and that's G's Jungle Corner. They've made these moss balls available locally. It just interlocks to the back, and that's it for assembly. I was super excited to try this particular pole because my Philodendron Burle Marx Fantasy, I just could not keep up with the watering using my usual cococoya poles. This plant has ultra fine roots, and in my experience, plants that have this type of roots do not do well on cococoya. And I believe it's because it dries out too fast. And I admit that I just cannot keep up with the watering. So, this type of pole being close to the back is perfect, I think. I want to show you all these props in particular that really bushed out with foliage as well as roots. Pay particular attention to this setup because this is a setup I'd actually recommend if you want to successfully propagate this particular philodendron. I grew them in water inside of a glass cloche, so they received consistent bright light as well as close to 100% humidity. Upon seeing the development of new roots, I added Super Thrive to allow the cuttings to gain nutrition and just to continue to make them more resilient over time. You'll notice on these cuttings, all of the nodes or most of the nodes have rooted, as opposed to the original cutting, which only rooted at the bottom node. So this is why I definitely recommend this setup of using a humidity dome or glass cloche because it loved it. Take a look at the roots on this second cutting. I should have gotten a measuring tape or something to measure the length of these bottom roots. I mean, they have been in here for a long time, but still, I really did not expect this length. It's probably long overdue for potting up as well. With those type of roots, usually I pot up once I see like 2 inches worth of roots, but I guess, I just was busy. To be quite honest, I was busy with the move. If you've been following my journey here on YouTube, you would know that things have lapsed, and clearly this second cutting went unnoticed. Okay, so let's start a new experiment. I'm going to pot up each of these propagations differently, using different substrates, using different poles. For example, this one is a moss pole as well, made the same way that my cococoya poles are made, except in this case, it's made with moss. So it's an open system as opposed to the Jay's Jungle moss pool, which is partially closed, and I'm guessing I'm leaning towards it being able to retain moisture better than these open systems. I got 2 lengths to try out, one short, one tall. Okay, so here's a system that you've probably never seen before. I have had a success growing my Philodendron verrucosum in this system that I'm going to put together here for y'all, and I'm going to try it again with my Philodendron Burle Marx Fantasy, and later on you'll see the success I've been having with the verrucosum. So I'm using the taller open moss pool, and I'm just placing it in a coffee jar just like this. So it looks like my Philodendron verrucosum. It's in a no drainage vessel with lacquer alone, and the moss bowl sits in water so it stays hydrated longer. I did this with my varicosum, and all of a sudden 4 leaves appeared. I propped it in water the same way, so I'm really hoping that I'd have similar success with my Burle Marx Fantasy. Of course, I'll keep you all posted here in case you want to try the system. So I'm just going to backfill this with lacquer and sit the cutting in. You'll see exactly how I do that once this gets filled. Okay, this is a better visual of how much lacquer I'm going to use in here. So I'm going to fill it 3/4 the ways up, and I'm going to put the cutting with the longest root in here because that is, it's basically water roots now. So I know that one will have the most success growing in no drainage and in semi-hydro. The length of time it's been sitting in water is what is giving me the confidence to put this one in no drainage. Secondly, I'm hoping having the moss pool sit in water as it's an open system, it'll maintain moisture longer and constantly encourage those nodes. Once the Philodendron Burle Marx Fantasy starts to climb, it'll encourage those nodes to continue to root into the moss and hopefully go down into the lacquer. My ultimate goal is to try and size up these leaves so I know getting each node to root successfully will give me the best chance of that. I'm going to plant the cutting now, establishing a root zone so that I always have a visual on those roots just in case things go downhill. For cuttings with such long roots that are ultra fine, it is nerve wracking to get those roots down in there. But I find twisting the cutting so that the roots spiral down into the vessel has been quite useful. And then I just prop the foliage off the edge of the vessel like that once I'm done. With the cutting propped like this, I was sure to leave a little space between the cutting itself and the pole so that I can backfill. And I'm going to make it a priority to get those roots that are growing out of the upper nodes, either under moss if I'm unable to get it under lacquer, just to keep those roots hydrated as well. I always try to backfill from the side if I'm using semi-hydro instead of top down to avoid breaking any of those new roots. I'm trying my best to do things as perfect as possible because I love, love, love this plant. I'll give you all close-ups of the foliage later in the video, but it's such a beautiful plant. I really am trying to put my best foot forward here to set it up correctly from the start. So yeah, this is just a quick trick that I do. I backfill from the side instead of top down to avoid breaking any roots, and I just shake the vessel to settle the lacquer. So things are quite stable in there. That's the root zone I want to have a clear visual on. And these are the exposed roots on the top that I'll probably just add some moss to cover to make sure it stays hydrated. And this is where the actual cutting is mounted against the moss pole on the top. Okay, so now that it's all situated, I'm gonna grab some pre-moistened moss. By the way, everything will be linked in the description below. Everything that you see will be down below, and if you don't, you could just message me anywhere, and I'll be happy to share the information. But with this pre-moistened moss, I'm just going to make sure and squeeze all that excess water out and fluff this moss properly because, like I said, with these ultra fine roots, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to grow. So I just top the vessel like this with the moss, and I'm hoping that once the roots bounce the pole, they'll just continue to grow into the moss pole itself. And the last thing I'm going to do is water it using Super Thrive. If you keep up with my plant chores videos, then you're probably wondering what the heck am I doing at Super Thrive now again when usually I use Great White once I've finished potting up a plant on new propagation. But as we're in experimentation mode, I decided to use Super Thrive instead because this is supposed to prevent transplant shock as well. And be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you won't miss if this flops or flourishes. I'm hoping at this angle you'll have a clear visual of how I'm watering this plant, more particularly the water line. I want to establish a water line that's very close to the root zone but not covering the root zone because these are water roots. I don't want to chance them getting dehydrated at all because they will be super sensitive having been grown in water for so long. So I want to show you all how I'm filling this vessel with the Super Thrive water and let me switch to this angle so that you can better see where I'm going to stop it. Just below that root zone, and by the process of capillary action, all the lacquer on the top will become hydrated over time as well. And just like that, we're done with this one. I'm just going to set it off to one side and prep for the other two cuttings that we're going to mount onto the moss poles from G's Jungle. In keeping with experimenting today, I'm going to pot those two up in my standard Aroid mix, but I'll explain a little more how I adjust it now since we've moved. And one of the poles from G's, I'm going to use moss in it, and the other one, I'm going to put soil in it and see if that makes any difference for these cuttings. I keep saying cuttings as though I'm living in the past. Propagations is what I mean. Believe it or not, but I've never used soil in a pole for a climber before. So that's something new for me. I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out. But first, I'm going to use moss. I'm going to set up the one in moss. And I'm using, I think those are like 4.5-inch clear pots. I got those on Amazon. And I'm just going to pile in my pre-moistened sphagnum moss. And I don't think I'm going to fill the entire thing with moss because I don't even know if this is going to work. So to just have my moss sitting in there, without any action, I think I'll just keep some back. So I'll fill probably just halfway or quarter way up and see if the propagation actually begins to grow and climb. And as the propagation grows or the plant grows, I'm hoping I'll just backfill with moss over time. Side note, these stackable poles are available in a clear version as well. It just was out of stock when I needed them. Just to bring some clarity on the pot size that I chose, usually I would use a 2-inch pot. But because these poles were quite large, I opted for a 4-inch circumference pot because I know the pole is going to take up half the space. So these propagations, even though they have such a tiny root zone, I think the growing space would be halved once the pole gets into the pot, and that should be sufficient for growing. I'm just doubling back over the moss with my fingers just to make sure it's sort of evenly spaced and just additionally fluffed to make sure that those fine roots can penetrate the moss sufficiently to continue rooting into this substrate. And I think that's it for this one. I'm just going to add my soil mix next. The Aroid mix that I use is the one that I get from Utopia Gardens. It's a premium Aroid mix, and in the past, before I moved, I would use this Aroid mix as is. But since I moved and my plants now live in the greenhouse where the humidity is super high all the time, I started amending it 50% with perlite. So it's a 50-50 mix I use now. This one is almost ready for me to add the propagation to. I just want to make sure I secure this pole properly. So I'm going to backfill to fill in any gaps as well as to just make sure I stabilize the pole properly. More than likely, I'm going to use a cover pot for it not to topple over. But I'm going to backfill to the back of the pole just like this to make sure it's not too wobbly. And shaking the pot really works to get the soil in all those gaps and will further stabilize it. Okay, so I'm going to add this propagation to this one. This one has the smallest root system, so I'm going to take a mental note of that. So when I'm watering, I'm going to be sure not to overdo it until I really see a dense root network growing down into the soil itself. That's the great thing about using these clear pots. I'm able to monitor the root progression. If you haven't noticed as yet, this one has two growing points, one at the top with the oldest leaf and one on the left or your left that has two new leaves on it. So that's the newest growing point. And I'm just lightly adding some soil to the top of that. More than likely, I'm going to put soil on it just to make sure it doesn't dry out again because these are water roots. I really need to stay on top of the watering for the first few weeks just to allow for seamless acclimation having been planted. I swear by topping my new propagations with moss because I find when I do go to water, when I'm pouring, it allows for even distribution of water downward. It's not like just directional pouring. So that way my substrate is evenly watered, well, to the best of my ability. It's also a visual indicator to me when I'm walking through the greenhouse when it dries out because it changes color. It gets to this light color that you're seeing here as opposed to this dark color when it has absorbed water. So while I'm taking care of over 500 plants, if I see moss revert to the light color, I know that that plant is ready for watering. That is usually my main cue to water a plant just to avoid overwatering. And this has proven to be quite useful to me over time. Any sort of visual cue that I could get in terms of knowing when to water my plant, I am always for. The last thing I want to do with this prop is to secure it properly using my Velcro tie straps to ensure that the node is touching the moss but still giving it enough wiggle room for any new leaves to emerge undisturbed. These it has such thin petioles that you don't want to suppress the emerging leaf, so there is a bit of wiggle room. And if you pay attention here, you'll see what I was talking about when you go to water your plant, when it's topped with moss, there's an even distribution of water when you're watering, so your substrate is evenly moist as opposed to, wet on one side. After we pot these up, I will present some footage of when I bought this plant back in June 2023. So you'll see the size plant that I was able to acquire back then and the struggles that I've had with it since then. So, I've learned a lot about it, and I'll share it with you all at the end of this video. Okay, and on to the last one. If you remember at the beginning of this video, I said that I'm going to try and use my Aroid mixer in this pool instead. It's the first time I'm using soil or something other than moss or coco coir for my climbing plants. If you have done this before, please comment below. I would love to discuss, how the results have been for you. I know people use different substrates in here and using tree, including tree fern, but I myself have always stuck to cocoa or moss. So, I'm always up for learning new ways to grow my plants. So, if you have experience with this method, let's get into it in the comments below. And just like that, this one is ready for the last prop. So, with this last propagation, if you look closely, to me, this is the ideal root system or length of roots you want to look for when you're trying to figure out if it's time to plant your propagation. It's not too short like the one, or sparse like the one before this, and not too long like the first one we potted up. To me, this is the ideal root system you're looking for to start potting up your props. But anyway, I'm kind of here nor there with this setup in that the Aroid mix is already falling through the holes in the pole, but I've seen people have so much success on YouTube growing their aroids like this, and you are able to plant your cutting or plant the node a lot closer or deeper into the pole. But at the same time, I'm super curious as to how this method or this setup performs. So I'll be sure to share the results with you all, of course. But I think this one is pretty much done. And the next thing I'm going to do is just find a suitable spot in the greenhouse. While I'm thinking about location in here, I'm just going to top dress it with moss like I did all the rest. This one in general, I find it doesn't require super bright light. And don't forget, at the end of this video, I'll get into the conditions that have been working for me in terms of getting this one growing or rehabbing it. You'll see the entire growing journey coming up shortly, but I'm trying to figure it out still. If you pay particular attention here, you'll see some of the aroid mix falling out onto the leaves. I'm not a fan of that at all. I find it leaves room for fungal and bacterial infection, so I'm going to be sure to clean those leaves off upon finding the proper location for it. But leaving soil on the leaves can cause the leaves to get damaged, or it just would not display as I would like it to be displayed. It cause discoloration, it could cause holes sometimes if it stays moist too long, and just basically cause leaf rot. So I try to avoid that as much as possible. Okay, so this one is done. I'm going to water it like I did the rest of them with some Super Thrive water and make sure it is all settled in. And coming up next is the history of this plant in my collection. A couple pro tips, what worked for me, what didn't. And I just want to give you all sort of a time lapse about how this particular plant performed in my care. And hopefully there'll be some tips and recommendations along the way. So let's just jump right into that next. Oh, but first, I want to make mention of this. My silver sword is shooting. Again, if you watched my plant rescue video, you know this one was deteriorating faster than I could just blink. But it's shooting, and I want to show you all me practicing one of my tips that I always recommend, which is letting the butt cut reshoot and then taking a cutting to start propagating it and reusing my propagation water because it actually contains growth hormones in there already, and that's it for me setting up this one. I will link the video in terms of how to get the best out of water propagations and just tips and tricks about using water as a propagation medium. But the main concept is reusing your propagation water because it contains auxins, which actually speeds up the process of propagation. So I'll be sure to link it in the description for you all. Okay, so let's go down memory lane. This was back in June 2023 when I first got this Philodendron Burle Marx Fantasy. I got it growing on this little makeshift moss pool. It did attach to it and was climbing, but it was super small, kind of like the size of my propagations currently. So this was the basic setup, and very soon after getting it, it was attacked by grasshoppers. So this plant has been a struggle plant from day one for me. Okay, so even though it was attacked by grasshoppers, I just lost the bottom leaves and it continued to grow. So that told me it had a bit of resilience. So let me show you how it bounced back, or should I say, glowed up after that. Okay, if you're still here and you're actually paying attention, did you notice that I only featured the top part of this plant? And that's because when I picked it up to film back then, it was featured in a favorites video, probably the year of 2023. The bottom part was completely eaten away. And my suspicions at that point was that snails or slugs took it out because we did have an African snail infestation in the yard and this one was growing outside. So I figured they had a dinner party on my Burle Marx Fantasy. I then proceeded to air layer it. That did not work. I eventually had to chop them up into single node cuttings and water prop them, and that worked. And this is where we are today with 3 plants. And just like that, you all are all caught up. To end this video, I'm going to show you all exactly where I placed the new plants. The two on the Jay's Jungle poles I placed close to the entry of the greenhouse so it receives sufficient light. I would say I'm going to update you all on how these perform. Remember, one is on a soil pole, the other on a moss pole. And then the last one, I'm already seeing that I'm going to get annoyed with the soil in this pool. More than likely, it's not going to be a permanent solution for me. And finally, the last one, which is in no drainage, is placed just opposite them. And in a future video, I'll be sure to update you all on how each of these systems work. I'm so excited for this experiment. Please comment below if you've tried any of these before, if you have any tips and recommendations. And I'll see you in the next one.